Assalamu alaikum and welcome to another episode of Living Islam in America. I'm your host, Johari Abdul Malik. In September of 2006, Pope Benedict XVI delivered a famous or infamous Regensburg address in which he quoted a Byzantine emperor, Matthew II Paleologos, who, in a debate with a learned Persian Muslim, said, "Show me just what Muhammad brought that was new, and there you will find things only evil and inhuman, such as his command of the spread by the sword. The faith that he preached is based on that." Muslims around the world were shocked and insulted, but instead of flooding the streets in protest or burning the effigy of the Pope, what emerged from that was 138 prominent Muslim leaders from around the world, scholars, intellectuals, Sunnis and Shias, converts, and native-born Muslims, was a document entitled A Common Word Between Us and You, a healing discourse that focuses on the creedal commonalities of, quote, the love of one God and the love of the neighbor between Muslims and Christians. Since then, there have been several unprecedented international religious and interfaith, intercultural meetings and dialogues, including one that took place at the Vatican in November of 2008. On today's program, we have invited several distinguished guests who are at the forefront of the Common Word Initiative to lay the foundations for the document and to bring us up to speed on this initiative. All that and more coming up next on Living Islam in America. Islam and Christianity are by far two of the world's largest religions. Together they make up half of the world's population, and despite doctrinal differences, they also share much in common. The Muslim initiative, quote, a common word between us and you, and the response by Christian and Muslim leaders around the world highlights the reality of the dangers of the world politics and the need for more and more dialogue between the two faiths. The document states, quote, without peace and justice between these two religious communities, there can be no meaningful peace in the world. The future of the world depends on peace between Muslims and Christians, unquote. We have assembled a distinguished panel to discuss the origination of the document and what has become, quote, the Common Word Initiative, and how relevant is it for the ordinary believer. We will also explore the differences and commonalities of both faiths and the face of religion in America, the Judeo-Christian and Islamic paradigm. I'd like to welcome Father Leo Lefebvre, a Catholic priest at the Archdiocese of Chicago and a professor of theology at Georgetown University. He is a longtime participant in dialogues with Muslim Christians and Buddhists. Next is Dr. Chris Sippel. He is the president of the Institute for Global Engagement. It's a think tank with legs that promotes sustainable environments for religious freedom worldwide. And finally, I would like to introduce one of the luminaries of our community, who is the son of a luminary of our community, Imam Faisal Abdul Rauf, chair of the Cordoba Initiative, as well as an imam at Masjid al-Farah in New York City, and the author of several books, one of them, What's Right with Islam. Gentlemen, welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Tell me about this issue of the common word. I know this comes out of a context. You just didn't like wake up one morning and say, let's come to a common word between us and you. What precipitated this discourse? I'll start with you, Chris.
As I understand it, I'm not Catholic, and we should defer to Father Leo on how it all came about, but the Pope gave a speech in Regensburg in 2006, quoted a Byzantine emperor about the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, and there was a negative quote. I think the Pope, to give him credit, was trying to make an argument about faith and reason and how they go together, but the illustration was certainly poorly received, and perhaps rightfully so. And from that, a number of Muslim scholars around the world wrote a response, challenging, as it were, to engage the Pope and Christianity in a conversation about these things that we have in common. And that's where it started in the fall of '06.
Father Leo.
The reference to the medieval conversation is rather strange. The Pope cites it without either agreeing or disagreeing with it, and then goes on and doesn't even develop it directly. It
was an off comment in a sense. It wasn't the central theme of the discourse.
It's not the central theme of the discourse, and he did not take a position either for or against this remark that was so negative towards Prophet Muhammad and Islam. Later, the Pope and Vatican officials clarified that the Pope had not intended to endorse the comment, but that wasn't clear in the initial delivery because he simply cited it without either agreeing or disagreeing. But if you go to the Vatican website, they added a footnote that clarified that the Pope had not intended to agree with this statement.
Now, I'm going to take you back. I think that before he was the Pope,
he was a German university professor, and this is part of the issue. One Catholic commentator described this as the German professor meets the world of the soundbite.
You know,
if he had given the same talk as a German university professor, it would have stayed within the rooms. He cited one scholar who dates one passage from the Quran as, I think later, and most scholars would disagree with that. So it's a minority opinion. He also characterizes Islamic interpretation of the Quran according to one school, which has existed, but it's not representative of Islamic scholarship today. He also attacked the Franciscans. These are Catholic theologians who disagreed with his theological heroes, but had never been condemned by any pope in history, Duns Scotus and William of Ockham. And this comes back to the issue that Chris raised about faith and reason. The Pope wanted to have a robust role for reason in the interpretation of faith, and he seemed to give a misleading interpretation of Islam, and then, by the way, beat up the Franciscans.
I want Imam Faisal to chime in. This framework, I mean, this is a very weighty, no wonder you have to have 138 scholars to jump in, because this is really way up there, the Muslim response to this.
Well, I think it's not so much only a matter of faith in reason, but faith in politics. Over the last, let's say, several decades, the role of religion in politics, especially in the Muslim world, and between the Muslim world and the Western world, has become more of an issue. And with the invasion of Iraq, and with U.S. troops in Iraq and Iran, and Afghanistan, not to mention U.S.-Iranian relationships, where the question of the role of religion in politics has become an increasingly important issue, or a player in the mix, if you will.
I see what you, in fact, now, I'm seeing this now, having been engaged in interfaith, I'm beginning to see this in a different light now, that this is not just a discord or a discourse around faith, which has created this discord, but it actually has some geopolitical implications, and that is part of
There's no doubt, because the Al-Bayt Foundation in Jordan, which was the sponsor of the Common Word, before that was also involved in another initiative which I was part of, where they brought about a couple of hundred Muslim scholars to Amman in Jordan in July of 2007. In fact, at the very end of that conference, July 7, 2007 was when the July 7 bombings happened in London. I was on my way from Amman to Australia, where they got a number of scholars to point out that takfir is prohibited in Islam. That's excommunication. We're not allowed to excommunicate anyone.
In fact, I'm gonna have to do some excommunicating myself right now. We're gonna have to take a break, and we will be right back. And this is a fascinating discussion.
Sure.